Hi, welcome to this short video introducing you to cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin and other related aspects. I'm Andy Henry and I've been into Bitcoin since 2011, and so I just wanted to set up this channel to share with you some of the things that I've learned over those years that may help you and save you time and energy learning about crypto yourself. So what's it all about? Well, depending on how much you know about crypto, I did start out with a plan to sort of tell you about all of aspects of the landscape. I started to draw a mind map out, and quite quickly it got a bit too overwhelming. I thought, there's no way I can sort of lay this all out in one video. So this video will be just an introduction. I'll start to introduce some of the terminology, some aspects of crypto, generally what it's about, and I'll follow up with more videos. So if you think that you're going to find this interesting, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and you can even tell me what you would like videos on, and I'll use that feedback to prioritize which other videos I do. So why did crypto get started? Well, the current state of our currencies is a little bit controversial, and if you've not been living under a rock, you'll have seen for yourself that some countries have had a really tough time of it. With the financial crisis that happened, the bailouts of the banks, countries like Zimbabwe had their currencies go crazy, and countries like Greece, people's bank accounts got limited. They took a haircut. The banks literally took money from their accounts. And so this idea that you are not the sovereign owner of your value really came into the top of people's minds. So when people saw their money that they thought was theirs, that was in their bank account, suddenly not accessible to them anymore, and maybe not even there anymore, it raised a few questions about what the state of the system is. So with that backdrop in mind, you can imagine that there were people looking at the system and wondering if there's a better alternative. One person, or actually I shouldn't say person really because we don't really know, a user in a community named Satoshi Nakamoto drew up a white paper for what we now know as Bitcoin. It was designed to be censorship resistant so that governments and banks couldn't tamper with it, couldn't print more of them and devalue the ones that existed. It was designed to be decentralized so that there was no one central place that was either the controller or that could be hacked. And it was designed to be both a store of value and a usable currency. Now, over the time that Bitcoin has existed, its usefulness in those aspects has changed. You may or may not have heard of someone buying a pizza for 10,000 Bitcoin back in the day. And right now, one Bitcoin is worth just over $6,000 and had reached a peak of $20,000 in December of 2017. So the value of something compared to fiat currencies is the way that most people think of it. So because of the dynamic nature of Bitcoin and how much it's changed in price over the years, its ability to be used like cash has been slightly compromised, and it's not stable enough right now for most people to consider it something they can use as an equivalent to cash. Some people do use it, they do spend it, some people accept it, so it does get used like that, but for the majority of people, the general population wouldn't think of it like that right now. However, a lot of people do still consider it a really good store of value, like gold. It's limited in supply. There are only 21 million Bitcoins that will ever exist. That's already programmed in. Over 17 million of them have already come into existence through the mining process, which I'll go into in a lot more depth in future videos. And some of those Bitcoins have been lost, have been sent to invalid addresses and disappeared. You may have seen also news of someone who had Bitcoins on their old computer back when they weren't worth much. The computer got thrown away, and then they realized 5 years later that there's actually $1 million worth of Bitcoin on that old PC that's now at the dump. So there are actually people funding the project to dig up some of these waste refuse piles in order to dig out these computers that have got the keys to get to some Bitcoins. So it's a bit of a funny old situation. It's a crazy ride if you're on it, and it's interesting for a lot of reasons. So consequently, people are interested in Bitcoin from different angles. I'm a techie, a marketer, and a trader, so I like it from all angles. You may have seen Bitcoin on the news. Usually it's to do with the price. Not always, but because of the volatility of the price. As I make this video, it's June of 2018. In January of 2017, a Bitcoin was worth $1,000, and that had gone up massively from the years before. So depending on when you got your Bitcoins, you may have seen tens of thousands of % of increase in their value. That obviously makes it of interest to quite a lot of people. The last few months, the fiat currency price of Bitcoin has come down, which has resulted in the typical Bitcoin's dead, it was all a bubble, it's popped now. But actually, when you look a bit deeper into what's going on in the space, you'll see that while the price may be going up and down all over the place, behind the scenes the technology is developing and building and growing. More projects are coming online. Even banks and governments that were publicly saying Bitcoin's a big funny old scam and people should avoid it, they're doing their own cryptocurrencies, they're buying Bitcoins, they're creating, some governments, some countries even are creating their own cryptocurrencies. So this stuff's not going away. Obviously Zimbabwe they're a really good example of a currency that got completely trashed to the point where they were printing $100 trillion bills. And that meant if you had normal bills of lower denominations, they basically became worthless really quickly. And people were actually having to take them to get them weighed by the wheelbarrow in order to swap them for anything of value. Another term you'll hear quite a lot once you start looking into this is blockchain. And so the terms cryptocurrency and blockchain tend to go hand in hand. Blockchain is the technology that underpins a lot of the cryptocurrencies, and it's the technology that underpins Bitcoin. So there isn't one big ethereal almighty blockchain that rules them all. Bitcoin has a blockchain, and blockchains are in use for other cryptocurrencies and other purposes. So you'll hear the term, but it doesn't always mean it's related to Bitcoin. So a cryptocurrency is a digital currency, but it's different from a normal digital currency in that it's the encryption technology that underpins it and secures it, which is the fundamental confidence that you can use this and not need to trust another person. So the blockchain technology itself is just the way to record the transactions that are happening on the system so that there's transparency. So with Bitcoin, for example, you can go and explore the Bitcoin blockchain and see any transaction that's ever happened on that blockchain. So if you have a Bitcoin wallet, you can see any transaction that ever came in or out of it ever in the history of Bitcoin. And so while it's often referred to as a private thing and something criminals might use, because of its really useful way to store and move a lot of value. So you can buy a lot of crypto or a lot of Bitcoin with fiat and then send that to someone anywhere in the world in a matter of seconds or minutes for really low costs. So when it first came about, it was used by anyone that might normally want to use cash but find that a problem. So the blockchains are used as the way to store the record, an immutable record that can't be changed, that is secured by encryption for these digital currencies. It's one of the reasons that makes them a store of value, because when you've done a Bitcoin transaction and it's been validated on the blockchain through a process called mining, which I'm going to go into in a lot of depth in other videos, then it's almost impossible for that to ever be changed. So it's really useful for anything where you want to record details of transactions and know that they are there and they haven't been tampered with. The way that you might hear this discussed or described is centralized versus decentralized or distributed. And so in the banking context, the centralized system would be one big bank, and everybody has to be authorized and transact via that one entity. That one entity holds all the details, does all the security, and authorizes all the transactions. Obviously, if you have tried to move money around the world, you know this is not necessarily a quick process. And with a lot of big entities, the bigger they are and the more data they have, the more they become a target for hackers. And so even the biggest companies in the world have been subject to hacking and having your personal details exposed and compromised. So obviously a centralized system has some advantages but also some disadvantages. With a distributed system, anyone can transact. They don't need one central authority. So I can decide to send some Bitcoin, for example, to anyone anywhere in the world, and I don't need a third party to tell me that yes, you can do that. I don't need them to do a security check on the other person. The security is all handled by the blockchain, and so I can do a transaction with someone across a border anywhere in the world without needing to know that person or have to check the security of that person. And also, because it's crypto, no one can request funds from my account. Not like when you're in a restaurant with a credit card and you go to pay, and by giving them your debit card or your credit card, you're giving them full access potentially to all of the funds you have. With crypto, there's no such thing as a direct debit or a bank pull request on your account. Money will only leave your crypto account if you send it somewhere. So you don't need to ask anyone for permission. Nobody controls it. It's not centralized. If your normal currency or your government or your banks have problems, they're not going to freeze your crypto account or take money from your crypto account. So it's got some advantages that are quite appealing in the context of haircuts, global financial crises with fiat currencies, etc. So the first blockchain was conceptualized in 2008 by Satoshi Nakamoto. No one knows who that is. If they're still alive or not, it's a little bit of a mystery. But basically they wrote the white paper for Bitcoin and published it in an open source way for anyone to go and use as they see fit. So it's still a core component of the current Bitcoin. It's the current core Bitcoin, again, you may see when you start looking some other things calling themselves Bitcoin, and that's because of the open source nature of Bitcoin, anyone can go take that code and copy it and create themselves something with that Bitcoin's properties and tweak it to be different in some ways. Some people have done that. One is called Litecoin. Again, it's used in a very similar way. It's very similar to Bitcoin, but because it's its own entity, the developers for that coin can make changes in accordance with the model that they've come up with for how those things get agreed and implemented. There's a lot of toing and froing between different entities in the crypto space about what should and shouldn't be the ways to progress some of these coins. So the traditional Bitcoin core developers get a lot of flack and a lot of competition from competing alternatives, some of them using the name Bitcoin in their new coins and some not. As far as the blockchain is concerned, each transaction, whenever anyone does a transaction on the Bitcoin blockchain, it goes off some miners, which I'll tell you a bit about later, validate that transaction. Those transactions, once validated, go into a block with some other transactions. They get cryptographically signed, and the block that they're in also has the data, the cryptographic hash of the block before it in it. So basically every block of these transactions is cryptographically signed and also cryptographically attached and related to the block that came before it. So if someone wanted to come and try and hack one of these, they'd have to hack the one before it, and the one before it would also have the cryptographic hash of the block before it. So basically it makes it almost impossible for these things to be hacked. The Bitcoin blockchain has never been hacked. So there's a total supply of 21 million Bitcoin algorithmically programmed in. Around 17 million of those are already in existence, or lost, or thrown away with the computer. So really, there's only about 4 million Bitcoins left to be mined and brought into in existence. So that gives it a nature that the supply is fixed. So if demand goes up, it's likely that over time the value of a Bitcoin will increase. That's fundamentally why a lot of people, from a financial perspective, have got into Bitcoin. They understand that basic situation and think, well, I think this thing's going to be around for a while. It's getting harder and harder to get them because they're coming into existence less and less. The supply is known and fixed. So therefore, if demand goes up, the price will go up. WikiLeaks actually were restricted from how they could get donations at one point. And so a lot of people moved to using Bitcoin to donate to them, which had the sort of happy for them side effect that as the Bitcoin price went up, the amount that they could turn those donations into as fiat currency went up as well. So they made millions of extra dollars from some of their donators being forced to find an alternative way to donate to them. You'll hear something called ICOs, or initial coin offerings. I'm going to go into those a lot in separate videos, so I won't dwell on them too much now. I'll mention them again before the end of this video. You can buy alternative coins with Bitcoin. So one of the things that keeps Bitcoin sort of fluid is the fact that many other coins that are being brought into existence, the way to buy them, there's no easy way to buy them directly with your fiat currency. So most people buy Bitcoins and then use the Bitcoins to buy the alternative coins. I did mention Bitcoin has a property of being a currency, although a lot of people don't see that it's solid in that property because its value changes too erratically. There are people who purely accept payment in Bitcoin for their services. A lot of programmers in the space are like that. Some of the speakers on the speaking circuit only accept Bitcoin as payment. And so it is something that is actually used to buy and sell things, as well as a store of value. How can you get Bitcoins? I've mentioned mining. So again, in other videos, I'll go quite heavily into mining. I'm a miner, been mining for a long time. I'll show you what that's all about and some of the ways of building the technology that's used for it. There are Bitcoin ATMs that you can go to with fiat currency and pay in some cash and get out some Bitcoin. You can go to websites like Local Bitcoins and find people who have Bitcoins and want to sell them, and will accept payment by PayPal or direct bank transfer. There are exchanges like Coinbase where you can associate your bank account with their exchange and put money into your crypto wallet with them and then use that to buy cryptos. I won't go into it in this video, but there are other ways. Things when the Bitcoin code gets cloned, that's called forking. So if someone does what they call a hard fork of the Bitcoin code to create a new Bitcoin, then you basically end up with two Bitcoins, one of the original and then one of the new one. So if the new one happens to be worth $100 a coin and you had 100 Bitcoins, then you'd have 100 of the new coins worth $100, and you basically didn't do anything for that. So that's one of the sort of beneficial and controversial aspects of crypto, which I'll talk about a lot more in further videos. So there are already a few ways you can get Bitcoin and crypto in general, and there are cards that you can get, payment cards that you can associate with your crypto wallet. So you can actually be in a situation where you can go and use a card to pay for your shopping, and it's actually your crypto that's paying for it. I mentioned wallets. Again, there are lots of different types of wallets. I'll do further videos on those. Suffice it to say, when you're a beginner, you probably will just go to a crypto exchange, and through the process of signing up for your account, they'll generate on your behalf some wallets in their system which you can use to buy crypto, to trade crypto, sell it or move it into other wallets. So those exchange wallets are really simple and quick. They do the work, but they're analogous to your bank account in that if there's a problem with that exchange, they could have access to your funds and you might not. So they're not the ideal place to leave your funds, but they're not a bad place to get access to them and swap them for other things. There are what we call hardware wallets. Again, I'll talk about wallets a lot more in the future, but you can have a physical thing which you plug into your PC, and it gives you access to your crypto. And so if that's the way you're using it, then you won't have a problem with an exchange going down or having problems and you not being able to get access to your crypto yourself. So here's a screenshot. I took it quite a while ago. You can see the price of Bitcoin at the time was $11,883. That was up quite a lot from the previous months. It hit 20,000 and it's come down since then. A lot of people speculate based on the price, and people look to mine cryptocurrencies that they think will go up in price, or that right now are priced in a way that means the cost of mining them is less than the cost that they could get for what they mine. So basically, people mainly look at the price. the reason that mining comes in is due to what they call the consensus model for the crypto. So consensus being the way that that particular blockchain or system decides how to put a thumbs up for a transaction being valid. I'll go into this in a lot more detail in another video separately, because there are a lot of ways to approach it. Right now, Bitcoin uses what's called a proof of work consensus model, and that means that blocks of transactions get mined and then added to the blockchain. So every 10 minutes, some new Bitcoin is given to the miners that did the work of validating all those transactions. There's something called the Genesis block, which is the very first block that's created in a blockchain, and it's the only block that will ever be in that blockchain that is not attached to a previous block, because it's the first one. After that, every time this work is done to validate these transactions, the block that they're in is cryptographically hashed and associated with the previous block for security reasons. So mining can take a few forms. You can do it just with a PC with a good gaming card in it. You can buy specialist equipment for it. You can do it as an individual. You can do it in a pool with other people. You can buy cloud mining contracts. So there are a lot of sort of roads that I could go into detail on here. So consequently, I'll do other videos about all that stuff. The way that I do my mining is based on gaming video cards. So basically what I've got is systems that are like a good quality gaming PC with a really good graphics card, except the focus is on the graphics cards more than the processor or the memory. So I build these things, I put as many graphics cards as the motherboard can handle, and then add them into the blockchain as a mining machine for the cryptos that I want to support. If you're interested in building this yourself, they're generally commercial off-the-shelf parts. So motherboard, processor, RAM, power supply, some sort of chassis, maybe a normal gaming one or an open mining one, which is what I tend to use. But I'll show you some others in future videos. And then some ways to lift all these graphics cards off of a motherboard that you couldn't easily directly plug them into, and then some sort of operating system. So if you're in any way familiar with PC technology, these are quite straightforward things, but as with everything, the devil's in the detail. So I'll do a few videos on this stuff in the future. Once you start building a few of these, you get some issues which you only get at scale. So how noisy they can be, how much power they take, how you can manage them, and how you can get rid of the heat that they generate. So these are all things that I've had to deal with and that I'll do videos on in the future. People come up with some quite interesting ways to do these. This is an image of someone who's basically used a bread or basket or milk carton to mount their graphics cards in. I use angled aluminium or aluminium tubing, and sometimes I use 19-inch rack mountable chassis as well, although these tend to be a lot heavier than the open air ones, and if you put the lid on, it makes them less accessible as well. Some people that scale up, this is the sort of arrangement I've got, which is more like shelving with racks of these things and the graphics cards just hanging free, so they're easy to access. If you get any problems, you can just get your hands straight away on wherever the problem is. When these things get scaled up, they can be quite massive, massive systems. There are some, you may have seen them if you've looked already. There's a big one, Genesis Mining in Iceland, have videos of their mining facilities. and there are some huge ones in China as well and in other places. When you're doing scales like this, the ability to get cheap electricity and to be able to cool the things becomes massively important. When you're just doing one rig with 6 graphics cards in your house, not such an issue. When you scale up, electricity, ability to control heat are massive things. Then you need to be able to control them. So this is just a screenshot from some of my rigs with one program from some website called Simple Mining. And basically you download it, put it on a USB stick, and then boot your rig from it. So you can create one of these mining rigs with no hard drive anywhere in the system. You just plug a USB stick in, the system boots from that, connects to the internet, and then you just access it via the internet. And you can control all of the systems, what coins or crypto you're mining. You can monitor the temperatures of your rigs, the speeds and clocking of the graphics cards. So it's really quite simple once you use a system like this. There's a website called whattomine.com. This is pretty much the de facto one that most people doing this type of mining use. So you can go there, put in the amount of hashing power, as we call it, that your system has, and it will tell you that at any particular time what is the current most profitable crypto to mine. Generally speaking, there's only a couple of types of graphics card from a couple of the big suppliers called AMD and Nvidia, and depending on which of those you tend to go for with your graphics cards, that will determine the type of mining algorithm that is more suitable to those cards, and that will drive which of the cryptos are more suitable. There are other systems you can use that will just hot swap between whichever's the most profitable for the day and pay you out in Bitcoin. So some people mine Bitcoin, but actually their system is actually mining something else. They just get paid in Bitcoin. I prefer to point the rigs to something that I mine specifically. Generally, I'm quite a fan of Ethereum on the project in general, and the platform that it is for future projects. So I like to support Ethereum by being a miner in their system. Again, if you want to work out how much you can make with this stuff, then you can put in to one of the Ethereum, for example, calculators, what your hashing power is, how much the power consumption is of your equipment, and what you pay for your power, and then it will give you a rough estimate of how much per day, week, month or year that equipment would make for you given those numbers. Obviously these things change all the time. Sometimes it's massively profitable, sometimes it's barely profitable. So depending on why you're in it, whether you're in for short-term gains or you just want to support the technology and maybe over the long term come out well, that will drive how you choose what type of hardware and what you're basing those expectations on. You'll quite quickly notice with crypto that the easiest on-ramps for crypto are via exchanges. And so a lot of people who weren't necessarily familiar with trading in the past start to get interested in trading once they've got some crypto. Once you've got a wallet on an exchange with some Bitcoin in it, you then start to see, here's what you could also buy with your Bitcoin, here's what your Bitcoin's worth, here's what some other coin is worth, and it does sort of open up a route to learning about trading as well, because by default these exchanges give you that ability. There are lots of exchanges. It's a funny one really, because with traditional trading you would generally pick one, maybe two exchanges that you use, and you wouldn't really be looking to go to other exchanges, and the main factor that you would use is the charges that are applied to your trades. With crypto trading, these exchanges, you might end up needing half a dozen of them if you're really in the crypto space, because depending on how you get involved, certain exchanges may or may not be needed for you. So, for example, if you're in the US, there may be some exchanges that have limitations for you. If you've just got interested in crypto because of a particular project, and that project is about to release some of its tokens or get you on board to buy its tokens as a sort of early adopter, it may be that their crypto is only on one exchange and it's not one of the normal ones. So you'd have to go sign up to a different exchange just in order to get access to the token or crypto from that project. So probably you'll end up being a member of more than one exchange for that reason. ICOs, again, this is a somewhat controversial subject in the crypto space. It's basically, it stands for initial coin offering, and it's sort of a tip of the hat to IPOs, or initial public offerings in the traditional space. What an ICO actually is just a fundraising method for a crypto project. That crypto project may have a currency attached to it, or it may have some tokens that will be part of the system. Could even be in a similar way to sort of loyalty reward points in some system that's being created. So it's not necessarily all about currencies, but usually there will be some element of the system that will allow you to buy a certain amount of tokens or coins earlier than when the project is live and publicly available. So this is a way that some people have got some good profits because they've got involved in projects before they're publicly available. They've got preferential access, and so they've ended up with some tokens or coins which, when they launched and got onto some bigger exchanges and became available to more people, bumped up in price because of that extra ability for people to buy them. So ICOs are something, they're a way for a team of developers to get funding for their new project. Strangely, quite a lot of these ICOs, they haven't actually created the project yet. So some of them are just a white paper and a website and a roadmap, and people are happily enough, if they trust the people in the team, for that to be enough to send some funds to them. So they can be really risky. They're not something to lightly jump into, but they are a sort of more modern way for teams of developers to get funding for their crypto projects in exchange for those funders, which could be tens of thousands of normal people rather than one or a handful of angel investors. So where normal equity funding might usually be the way that a technical project might get off the ground like this, these days ICO funding is really coming into its own, and people are raising a lot more money than they normally would have done through traditional funding, and also a lot of people who wouldn't have had access to fund those sort of projects can now do that. One of the main issues that's currently facing the bigger coins is scaling issues. So Ethereum, for example, it's one of the really good platforms. It's very popular. It's basically added another layer of programmatic abilities on top of what would be available on something like Bitcoin. So you can do things that usually you wouldn't do with normal money. You can automate things. You can have what would usually take multi-party signatures be just automatically controlled and fulfilled. They have what are called smart contracts. And so Ethereum is a platform that's being used in much different ways to Bitcoin. One of those ways recently, or a few months ago now, was a game called the little teddy bears were done, what were they called, Beanie Babies, in the same way as Beanie Babies were done. And suddenly the collectible nature of these things made them worth what you would consider way more than should make sense. So CryptoKitties was born as a blockchain-based, Ethereum blockchain-based game where you sort of bred these CryptoKitties and they had their special features, and you could pay more for one that breeds faster or has special attributes. And it got so much traction so quickly that it made the Ethereum blockchain grind to a halt for a while, and so highlighted the scaling issues that some of these blockchains have if they get used in ways that are not necessarily what you might initially think if you were thinking about it in terms of currencies and store of value. So crypto jobs and salaries, again, this is one of these techie industries where demand is outstripping supply. Because of the nature of crypto and it being so new, and there being multiple types of blockchain and lots of projects, usually there's not enough developers for these blockchain technologies to meet the current demand. A lot of technology related to blockchain is quite easy to see when you just look at jobs that mention blockchain and what other skills they mention. So you'll see things like Ethereum, DevOps, Java, Agile, Node.js, Angular, Python, HTML. So if you're a techie and you're a developer and you're wondering what extra skills might be useful, there's a definite need for blockchain developers, and you can quite quickly see for yourself with a bit of research what type of technology would be relevant for the type of project you might want to be involved in. So if you're a developer and you've been thinking about moving into blockchain, right now is a great time. There's a high demand. You probably can increase your salary and learning a new technology or two along the way. And yeah, you'd be in a really good position right now if you were a somewhat experienced blockchain developer. So that's all I want to mention in this video for now. Obviously, the mind map that I showed at the start pretty much tells you there's a lot more to come. I've left some links here so you can see where else you might go to have a look around and find some more information. And in every video, I'll also in the future show you new resources and places where you can go get more information if you want. So hopefully that's been useful to you. It's just an introduction and there's a lot more to come, but that should get you started.